Evening. Yeah, you're ready, yeah? You're in live now.
All right.
And of course, as per usual, this time between now and half an hour into 9 o'clock, of course, we're taking a look at Namibian authors and the industry at large. And I think we have quite a great, or at least a rich history of great Namibian authors, people that deserve to have the accolades. The necessary recognition. And so tonight we are privileged to be joined by one of Namibia's finest authors as well. It's Nelson Kalangula. He's got a book that's still in the way. It's called Namibian of Stature, Peter Tanyengenge Kalangula's biography. And of course, we on Thursdays, that's when we dissect the material properly. But I think it is important for us to get to know the author, the mind of the author, and why is it that they felt compelled, for example, to write. Peter. So I actually saw the cover.
Right.
I think it was on I think it's Fidel's Estate, and I thought this is, first of all, it looked very, very interesting, and the fact that we're speaking about it now off air makes me want to read it even more. But let's take a look at you as an author, Nelson Kalangula. Who exactly is Nelson Kalangula?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, let me thank you for the invitation to the show, and good evening to the listeners out there, and of course to the future buyers of the book. Good evening to all of you. The name is Nelson Kalangula, as indicated. I am the author's the owner of the biography, grandson. Yeah, the son's son.
The son's son.
Yes, he's my grandfather.
Great.
Yes.
And so of course that means that this is a very personal publish for you.
Indeed.
But let's take a look at, I think, just the culture of authorship in Namibia in general.
Right.
Because I mean, we're just talking off air now about how you spend a great deal of time putting material like this together.
Right.
Finding this information, finding the relevant people to speak to, and there's somewhat of a stronghold there by the publishing, because either the publishing houses are not here. You'd have to go to South Africa, and even those guys want to take more percentage from your material.
Exactly.
So we have a problem with that, correct?
Correct.
Let's take a look at perhaps why it is necessary for people, Namibian authors especially, to have exclusive and 100% rights to their material.
It is very important because first and foremost, it brings money back home, and of course it empowers a lot of people that are trying to get out there. Like in my instance, I decided also to go 100% ownership, and with the assistance of the lady called Raquel Andreas Kayoko. She's currently, she wrote a book, Hey You Liberator. It's currently out. It's out today. It should be available to see online.
Yeah.
And she's been guiding me through. And I chose to basically just publish through her because she's Namibian. And of course, I'm empowering her in this instance. And but I see it has been quite of a challenge getting publishers out there just to assist me. And I see that many Namibians and many upcoming authors that would want the same would face the same challenges. The thing of the 10% is critical, because really all that work that you do and then you just get a mere 10% out of it, you're not profiting. I mean, the idea to write books shouldn't be about profiting. It should be about getting an idea out there. We understand that, right? But in the economy and economic circumstances we live in today, at least one should go by with something. Yeah, because most of the time when we write books, we want to take these proceeds to charity organizations and do good for the community and so forth. If we don't bring this type of incomes into the country and rather take it out to European publishing houses or South African, then we don't do well for our people. So we need to empower Namibian publishers more, and of course educate the whole public and show them where exactly these publishers can be found.
Right. And of course, you speak with great patriotism there, which is, it seems to me, one of those missing elements as well. But your material, and especially this book here, is one that has got a very, very local context. Right. One of the other things that we perhaps find is that sometimes the local material themselves, they are not relatable to the Namibian constituent. How is there a format, or at least a manner, in which one should write if you want to garner a local audience? Because maybe sometimes it's not so much because people don't want to buy, maybe it's that the material there is not relatable. Is there a format, is there a manner as a Namibian author that you must consider perhaps before you're writing a book and say, if I want to reach out to the Namibians properly, this is the manner that I should communicate my message?
Of course. I believe you should picture it like a teacher. Basically, if you're writing a book, you're putting out an idea. And you should put yourself in that position that, look, I know nothing. What would I feel like if I am to read this book that I'm reading now? So a person not knowing anything should be able to know something at the end of reading your book.
Yeah.
So you should be able to bring that out.
Yeah.
So if you can put it in as much as layman terms as can get, that would be really reaching out to more audience. The idea is not to get too critical in it, but when it comes to a book, what I have come to learn is all you have to do is just write. Don't worry about the errors or the mistakes that you do. There is editing to come, and there is a whole lot of process that follows after that. Get the idea on paper and then get to go. And then, of course, you fine-tune it as you go.
When you say that, as far as conceptualizing an idea, you should just write. Are we saying that if you perhaps spend too much time trying to critique the manner in which you've written, you might lose an idea?
Of course.
Are we saying that you're just piecing these ideas together, not necessarily in an orderly manner?
Not necessarily, but first you have to come up with that table of content. Of course, when you write, you need to know why you're writing to, and it's like writing a summary. I mean, you have a beginning, of course, the introduction, body, and then the ending. So basically, you go in that format. But what I say is, you put in what you think needs to be there, and what you think is relatable to what you're writing, and of course, to not concentrate on the editing part as yet. Put it on the table, otherwise you will leave out some information that might have been. The problem many of our people have is thinking too much and afraid of being very critical and afraid of stepping on the wrong feet and so forth. That shouldn't be really the issue here, because how will we liberate our people's minds when we don't write about the things that they need to hear? Because I see there are a lot of books that are being repeated nowadays. A book has been written 10 years ago. It's being written today again because they want to please someone. Because they want to score points with a certain individual somewhere, maybe to get a tender or whatever, maybe. Just in that line. But the idea should be to liberate the people's minds, give them new ideas, and of course help them understand where they come from. And this is more in the line that I'm going with my book, with the Namibian of Stature. Yes.
And I'd like for us to touch a little bit on the context, really, because like you're saying, it seems to me sometimes the material becomes a bit too monotonous, you see. So if somebody's writing a book about the 10 steps to success, and Jeff Bezos, who's the world's wealthiest, has got a book, chances are that I possibly would buy Jeff's book first before I buy Franklin's. This is just logical, pragmatic thinking. But at the same time as well, that same Jeff is not able to ever write a Namibian context book. And is it because we don't spend enough time to know who we are that we have less relatable narratives in our material that Namibians could relate to? Or is it an issue of access? I mean, like, for example, a book like yours, Namibian of Stature, that means that everything about this biography and everything about this body of work is centered around Namibia. And so is it that authors perhaps either don't have access to information, or it's much easier to copy and paste a book that already exists? It's much easier for you to, to just, for a lack of a better word, perhaps quote somebody from existing material already. What seems to be that hold there?
Well, you said it quite right. We have a problem, especially with our kind. We fail to support our people. We don't support each other. I've been having problems with challenges getting a sponsor for this book. It's not yet out. We are busy with the production now. And the problem is, you get a sponsor today and tomorrow they bug out or they completely ignore you. So that's a problem. But if it was another person of a certain figure or status, they would rush to it. I mean, we see many funerals these days of well-known people.
Yeah.
You can see how much contribution it's being given, but just a normal person, it's not getting there. The lack of support for those that are trying to upcome, to bring themselves up, it's lacking. And with a well-established person writing a book already, it's not speaking more to the people than the person that is down there. Yeah, the person that is down is more relatable to those that he's writing to, because the billionaire like Jeff Bezos that you mentioned, he would write to an audience more in his status already. Yeah. Now, what our people do, we try to reach Bezos' status first before understanding what our status is. Yes. And that's where the problem is. Now, with programs like yours, like right now, which is very, very much applaudable, this is where we can open up people to come in and say, look, do not be afraid. It's okay to come through and just talk. It starts with an idea. You need to talk. As Africans, we talk around the fire. Yeah, and most of the books got lost there at the fire. We do not write. We don't have a culture of writing, and that's where most of the books got lost. Thomas becomes Tommy at another fireplace. And then it becomes Tom's, and then it becomes Toma. You see how history is being lost there. We need to start getting to learn how to document this and put it on paper, and then pass it on to the rest.
So the oral tradition needs to be archived in a sense and put in books. Now, one of the things that we, at least in my personal philosophy is, if I'm going to desire to want to think, sometimes you must risk being offensive. It's how it works, because it is very difficult. It is very, very difficult to have serious conversations and them not being offensive. Because if you're going to grow, and if you're going to undo an ignorance of sort, you are going to have the uncomfortable conversations. And perhaps, maybe, like you were saying earlier, maybe the fear is that because we do not want to suffer that ripple effect, we would much rather play it safe. But at the same time, we also know that history has got no shortage of people who try to play it safe, and that might have cost them their freedom. It might have cost them their lives. The courageous people sometimes, unfortunately, although it might cost them even their life, they dare to speak, or at least they dare to stand on this ground of truth. Now, given the nature of your work, given the nature of your book here, and the fact that we're talking about how somebody would jump on board and say, look, man, I would like to participate and support this idea, and then perhaps maybe later find out, this, because we're saying there's no such thing as controversial. I think it's just what's allowed and what is not allowed.
Spot on.
Unfortunately, it's what it is. And I was saying to you, could that also be fuel for the fire for the next book? In that, what is it exactly you would think in your personal capacity that would have people withdraw from the publishing of this book?
Well, it's a story of a one-sided show that has been sold to the people. Yeah, when you sell one side of a show, it becomes so intertwined into the people's minds, and that becomes their belief. Sort of like how Christianity was sold to Africa. They get stuck to that. And with a book like Namibian of Stature, it's a book that tells what happened in Namibia, which is a story that no one really touches on. We have so many leaders that are not documented, that served their times in the previous government. I would say previous government because there was no coup. There was nothing of that matter. There was an election and the handover was given. You see? And we still use the same laws that they used to use back then. So it's still, it's just the same,
So it's an equal representation.
Exactly.
And an equal documentation
Right.
Of whether figures of now, whether figures of before. But history has always been at the mercy of he who tells it.
Exactly, the victor.
Correct. Is the book perhaps, for a lack of better word, looking to at least expose the average Namibian to both sides of the coin? That is fine. The book is not beckoning for you to change your mindset. The book is simply saying, here is a narrative
Right.
that you might not necessarily have had access to.
Right.
Might be a painful narrative, but again, you cannot have real conversations without them being uncomfortable. Is this what the purpose of the book is?
That is right, 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because you need to differentiate here, and of course, just make people understand that there is a gap in that part of history.
Yeah.
Yeah, and many of the children born after independence, they don't really know their history. And what would you teach them in the schools in the future? What would history be about? Do we still have to go back to Jan van Riebeeck and all those? You know, we need to celebrate our people more, bring them their stories forward.
Yeah.
And of course, get these books in schools. And then that's how we get our children also get to know about their figures and be proud of where they come from. One thing for sure is if you do not if you do not respect where you come from, very soon you will forget where you come from. And that's forgetting exactly
Who you are.
who you are.
It's an issue of those that do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it.
100%.
But it's also those who don't learn from an equal past. Those who don't learn from an actual past, or else the information you have, like anybody else, have just been fed to you. And so the idea with this book, again, for anybody that is listening, and again, I think we'll be able to dissect this book as soon as it's out there. The idea really has always been, personally, in my personal capacity, I like to read material that's challenging, material that changes a narrative. There's a gentleman, and I forget his name now, but he said, look, in order for me to grow, what I generally would do is I would associate myself with people that have a different worldview than me, that have a different opinion than me, that might have a strongly different opinion than me. So for a lack of better word, if I'm Christian, I possibly want to hang around, or at least befriend people of a different worldview, maybe agnostics, maybe Muslims or whatever, because they help me do two things. Either they help me affirm my conviction, question it, or evaluate it, because you can't grow without this. It's easier to be sold one story, and it is easy for you to live and die in that story. You know, I mean, we hear stuff like, no, that's just how Bambu guys are. Oh no, that's just how Herero men are. That's just how Caprivi men are. And that narrative has just been one-sided. It has been accepted. But what if that narrative does more damaging than good? Correct. Now, let's take a look at the estimated time, perhaps, of the release of this book and how that would look like, given its nature, and how far in the process is the publishing?
In the process now, with the lady that I've spoken about before, Raquel, she has everything now. I've already gave her the manuscript, and she done some part of editing in it. She's been busy with it, but our main problem has been the sponsorship. We are facing numerous challenges of sponsorship. So we plea out there for those that are really interested in this course just to come through and assist, to get this out for the good of the Namibian history, to be documented, and for other children also to learn out of this, and those in the future also to have something to be proud of. And I do not do this just because it's my grandfather. I do it also as a gift to our Namibians, you know.
Because we were speaking about 3 years. You see, if it was just something you were doing simply because it's a family member, I would assume that 3 years would be a bit too long.
Right.
Because you could have just written a letter off of the memory that you have. But you're talking about the sources that you got information from. You spoke about a gentleman from South Africa, for example, who at the time himself was busy already drafting a biography. Why did you feel the need to take this much time? Was it so that you were absolutely accurate in your estimation?
Well, in my instance, I came to learn about, I came to know my father's family quite at a late stage. In the time when my father went and when he passed, Peter Kalangula was the only man I could look up to. Yeah, so I spent a lot of considerable time with him at the last minute of his life. And of course, I was there by his deathbed when he passed to his last moment.
Yeah.
So it touched me so much, and I had this profound wish and will to learn what this man was all about. When he died in 2008, I already wanted to write something about it. I only came to find out in 2017 that there was a small draft that was written about him by the man called Weber in South Africa. And I only got that when I went to South Africa to him in Durban, and that's how I brought it forward. And then I started drafting and getting some more contents, interviewing people, and of course visiting national libraries and archives and so forth. And of course visiting newspapers, because most of these contents, it was happening in the newspapers at the time. And that's where you find dates and you know, the events where it took place and so forth.
Yeah.
So it was more centered in that this data collection that I was busy with, it was more centered on what Weber had.
Yeah.
But then I just increased and amplitude on that. It really took me 3 years, possibly more now, since I'm still busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it will be a back and forth between Raquel and I to push it back and so forth, up until we get those funds. She's looking at once we get those funds, then we look to launch within 2 months if we get the funds. Within 2 months.
Let's talk about the funds, because you know, people are listening now.
Yeah.
And again, if we want to be able to grow a culture, you need to be able to invest in it.
Right.
Let's talk about those funds, and perhaps for any listener that's listening, perhaps they just got their pension money, and
Right.
they too know the great history of a great man, and they would like to contribute. Who is it that they need to communicate or contact?
Right. Well, the person of contact is Nelson Kalangula, the author. The cell phone number is 081 2890 877. I repeat, 081 2890 877. I should be able to facilitate accordingly, and of course connect this gracious person and this very humble giving person.
Yeah.
I would be able to facilitate and link them up with a publisher.
Yeah.
Just to make it more transparent, and of course give all details just for that book to come out. So definitely they should just get hold of me, and I direct them accordingly. And then of course we get to sort of just make it our project.
Yeah.
I want to make this as far as a Namibian project as it can get, because believe you, and I can be held I can be held accountable for that. With the proceeds of this, I plan to do something good for the Namibian nation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
Are we also taking a look at perhaps, you know, because some of the things that does not happen here is there is not a lot of readings, you know, like authors would have their book, and people would go for like a live reading, reviewing of the book. Is that something that you're perhaps looking to do, perhaps even at university level, because it might be very difficult then to somewhat convince an elder, but I think especially at high school and university level, these are the spaces where, although the tree might be bent, it can still be straightened. Is this something that the book is perhaps seeking to do, to engage those the stakeholders in those industries, given that they are young, that they can grow up at least with an accurate idea of history?
That's exactly the point, because the idea, as you mentioned right there, that the culture of reading is also fading away. We have a lot of contents coming through YouTube and audiobooks coming through. So the idea is to bring about back that culture, and of course to introduce it to more. I mean, it has never been our culture anyways. We always tell stories around the fire, and we want that to fade. I keep saying a lot of elderly people are going, and we are letting them leave without telling a story. Yeah, perhaps if we start visiting these elderly with a notebook, I think that will do us good. And then of course we bring out stories out of them. So the idea is to bring out the culture of reading, and of course just to make sure that the history is passed on to the generation to come. And it doesn't fade, because good figures are being left out in the dust, and of course they are not being recognized for what they have done. Namibian independence was not a one-man show. It took a lot of people, a lot of lives, And many of these people need to be recognized. We see a number of people that are getting shine for what they did not do. Yeah. And that should not be really acceptable. It's high time we start recognizing the people that really fought in whatever way they fought.
Yeah.
We need to write it down. Whether they made mistakes, let's write it down. Whether they did good, let's write it down. The idea is to learn from their mistakes so we don't repeat them in the future. And that's what we need to pass on to our children as well.
Really simple as that.
Yeah.
Before I do let you go, because I'm really enjoying this conversation here. Right. I think the last book that I might have read in this area was through a gentleman who actually did, but what they did was a bit more of a biography of the late Nangili Nashima, for example. Now, we knew her as a musical being, but her story really, what was encapsulated in this biography was absolutely amazing. Just her contribution, stuff that we did not know outside her music. And that's what you're saying here, that look, no one is without their flaws, but that's not the issue. The issue here is the documenting of every figure. Hitler was not perhaps the most liked figure, but history is still documented about him because you learn from him. Obviously, there's no sane human being that might agree with his atrocity, but there's a lot to be learned about his structure. There's a lot to be learned about how he organized his hierarchy, for example. Is it a good history? Might not necessarily be, but it's still a necessary history so that we do not go back. Perhaps in parting, really, why is it necessary for me, the listener, to retain an open mind and say, it's fine. Perhaps you are protecting yourself in a sense.
Right.
That you cling on to this information and this is the gospel to you. But now and again, it is okay to consider information like this as well. Why is it necessary to retain that open mind?
Well, if you keep a closed mind, you don't grow. There is no development when there is no new ideas. If there is old ideas and they are not brought forward, we do not learn from them. The idea should be about learning so we don't make mistakes in the future. Now, if we don't learn what these strategists did, what they overcome their challenges, if we don't learn from that, then we are doomed to repeat them in the future. Now, that takes an open mind to understand a person that, look, there have been a lot of propaganda in the past. These guys have been called names just because they were working for the previous government, right? Now, if we do not open the people's minds to say, look, they were just working, they were just employed. And of course, they drove policies and so forth, but like any legislator in parliament, they have to debate for or against. You needed Namibians there, otherwise would you let no Namibians to be there? We need to adapt to that open mind that there were people in the country that fought for independence but did not want to take up arms. Yeah, and in my ideology is when a house is attacked, who is more brave, the one who stays in the house or the one who goes out? Now we are recognizing the one who went out, not to say that they did not do good, the challenges were tough. But what about those that stayed with the fire? And those that stood for the fire, that against the fire, and say, look, we are in one house. Look, Franklin, if you and me argue, you know where I stay and I go back home. Yeah. I'm in trouble there.
Yeah.
But if you and someone where you don't know where they stay, where their residence is, they are safer. The guys knew where Tanyengenge was staying, but he kept being vocal.
Yeah.
And that should tell you something. Let's have an open mind about stories like this, and let's have an open mind of learning.
Yeah.
That's how we grow. In simple short.
In simple terms.
Yeah.
That number one more time for somebody listening that would like to participate in terms of sponsoring, or at least just they could even help in kind. You never know. But the number again, and of course there's a transparency to this. First of all, because this book needs to be launched. Right. It is not a pyramid scheme. It is a necessary piece of document that every Namibian should get. So we'll share this number. and it's not a space to ask for airtime or to ask whether people leave. Really, if you know somebody or you yourself are willing to sponsor or at least help in any manner, please contact Nelson on this number.
081 2890 877.
Yeah.
That is 081 2890 877.
All right.
That's right.
All right. So again, don't forget, as soon as we'll be able to extract the book properly on Thursday, but the platforms exist now. We're saying maybe instead of coming to read a foreign book on air, how about we start and give the platform to the people that tell our stories? And I'm not saying that the other people's stories don't matter, but what good are those stories when you can't relate to your own, right? Don't forget, Friendly Speaking coming up in about an hour. Nelson, thank you so much for making time with us. I can't wait to dissect the book.
Right.
Yeah, we would need to do that.
Yeah, right.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation again, and thank you to the listeners, and hope to hear from them soon.
Definitely.
Right.
Hi.
Let's listen to the music, relax, and have fun.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Madonna.
Yeah, that's gonna be
Hi, I'm Robbie Williams.
that's what my step listening.